Good evening. Welcome back to the Healthy Doubt blog on the Common Sense channel. Today's topic is Hinduism, two more sides. So, let me first explain what that means. Two more sides. Today is a little longer video than it usually is. So, I'll just get right into it. Um, if you remember, there was another video called Complete Knowledge. In Complete Knowledge, I told you that all knowledge is like an elephant, and you have to keep seeing it from different sides to get to the completeness of it. So, only when you keep turning it over, you keep seeing it from different angles, you learn to see more and more of that elephant. So, we're going to approach Hinduism also like that kind of an elephant. And I know most people would probably think that they already know everything there is to know about Hinduism. But so we'll just talk about it from two additional sides here. So, if we say that a person's knowledge of Hinduism is like a rock, that's one way to compare knowledge, because anyone, when you ask them what they know about something, they know it as a complete thing. They already have a full idea about it. So we can say your knowledge is like a banana, we can say your knowledge is like a river, we can say your knowledge is like a tree also. But here I have for the purpose of this presentation, let's just say your knowledge is like a rock. uh, Also, because I've already added rock here now and I can't change it, so we'll talk about knowledge being like a rock. So say I was to take a hammer and hit this rock really hard, what will happen? Obviously, it will break into its constituent parts. It will break into multiple different pieces or fragments. So each fragment, the surface of the rock will look something like this then. And these are all the parts of that knowledge that went into it to make it the rock, to make it the complete knowledge. So, talking about knowledge of Hinduism, you may say that your knowledge of Hinduism means you have some knowledge of rituals, you have some knowledge of what it means to be part of Hindu community, you have some knowledge of devotion, some knowledge of maybe concept of karma, you have some knowledge of mantras, and so many other things. You have knowledge of history, you have knowledge of freedom inside that Hinduism gives you. You have knowledge of a certain kind of classification of Hindus, all sorts of things. And this is not by no means complete. You may have other kinds of knowledge also about Hinduism. But in this video, we're going to talk about it from two sides. Those two sides are, we're going to talk about it from classification, and we're going to talk about the freedom also of inside Hinduism. So, from those two sides, from those two aspects, we are talking about the knowledge of Hinduism. Now, right at the beginning here, without talking too much about any one kind of religion or Hinduism itself, let's just talk about ways to handle the afterlife. Now, the enigma of this universe is answered in many ways, but the enigma is that we don't really know what lies after death. And our civilization, of course, is not the brightest civilization when it comes to this thing. But here we are going to sort of try to go through all the different ways that a human being can think about or man handle the afterlife. Handle is the better word. Now, when we say handle the afterlife, uh, we are talking about possibilities of being. This possibilities of being is not possibilities of thinking, but because we understand only possibilities of thought, it will appear like that. So it's very likely to be misunderstood But let's get into it anyway. What is the easiest way to understand the afterlife? The simplest response to any question in this universe is to not answer it. And similarly, the easiest way to handle the afterlife is to not try to understand it to begin with. It is the idea that you can just dismiss this question of the afterlife and just believe something. So, and so it happens that most of us in this world are believers, which is to say, most of us in this civilization 2024 that you and I are part of, most of us in this civilization are believers. Now, here we are not talking about the object of belief, we are not talking about what you believe in, we are just talking about the idea of being a believer. In our day to day conversation, this sentence that I believe or I firmly believe that so and so things are there, or that people should be this way, or that we can all get along, whatever it is, I firmly believe that believe word is very, very important. And in that way, the afterlife also, most of us are believers. Now, what is the opposite of a believer? I'll give you a hint. It's not being a non believer, it's not being an atheist. The opposite of a believer is a seeker. And so it is a person who is looking for an answer as one who has already found it, as opposed to one who has already found it. A believer has found the answer, a seeker is looking for the answer. In that way, a seeker is the opposite of a believer. And so, on the opposite end of believer, we have seeker. Now, we've got believers and atheists both here. So, and I'll just speak briefly, I'll tell you about atheists. An atheist is a person who has been a believer in the past. It is a person who now denies God because he used to be a believer who was affirming God. And so, believers and atheists are kind of similar in that way. But the opposite of believer is seeker. So, what are all the ways that a seeker would approach to handle the afterlife? The most obvious thing that a seeker can do is, of course, to read and read that, read what? Read whatever others have written before him about the afterlife. If you read a lot of things about anything, you become a scholar. This is different from religious scholar. Religious scholar reads one type of belief and its derivative books. A actual scholar would read multiple different kinds of beliefs. Being a scholar is like an idea that you can read multiple different types of philosophies without getting seriously affected by any of them. So, the first type of seeker you have is a scholar. Now, what other ways can there be to think of the afterlife or to understand the afterlife? An obvious way is first, at least understand yourself, both in body as well as mind. So, people who would explore their bodies to the limits that were possible and their minds to the limits that they were possible were called as yogis, which most of us know as the people who practice yoga. Well, most of us know about yoga, you don't know about yogis, but okay. Yogis was originally uh, one of the ways to handle the afterlife. Now, what other way can there be to handle the afterlife? It's by understanding life itself. You look at these trees, the fruits, the vegetables, the plant life. This is not botany because this is a link between human life and plant life that is being explored here. And this was called Ayurveda. It is a way of seeking because it is about the interaction. It is about how the plant life affects human life. Now, you can say that this is also what modern medicine is kind of like. It is also a way of handling life. Is it a way of handling the afterlife also? It's a bit of a gray area for me, at least. Both the Ayurveda practitioner and the modern medicine practitioner are definitely scientists. One is of the past, one is of now. But this is my thing with the modern medicine. Modern medicine seeks to avoid death and not address it. It seeks to prolong life as a primary goal rather than improve the quality of life and death as a wholesome goal. In that way, it does not rationalize the entirety of existence. You might have seen those people in ICU beds, some of whom have been there for months together. In that way, modern medicine is working on prolonging life. It is indefinitely choosing to keep that person alive because it does not address death, it seeks to avoid death. And in that way, I say modern medicine is not a way of handling the afterlife. Now, what other way can there be to handle the afterlife? You were looking at plants, you can also look up at the stars. Like looking at the plants, we did not call it botany. We are not calling this astronomy, we are calling it astrology. Why are we calling this a way of handling the afterlife? Because astrology very much does include the afterlife. Like if you talk to an astrologer, you will realize the way the terminology is put forward, the way things are spoken about. Death is very much a part of astrology. Now, what is yet another way to address the afterlife? If you dismiss the question of the afterlife and do not come up with a answer, you can consider your work to be the meaning of life itself. This is something like a believer where you dismiss the question, but unlike a believer, you did not come up with the belief system. This is also not work is worship, just that work is life itself. These were people who were called karma yogis. They handle life as a social pattern that must be executed. That can be marriage, can be family, can be ideas around employment, can be a very particular set of ideas around rituals. They try to do good deeds and avoid bad deeds. You may have heard, positive thinking, negative thinking. These people are karma yogis. They are talking about life as a series of deeds. They try to maximize the good deeds, minimize the bad deeds. Now, what other way after this can you think of as a way to handle the afterlife? Can you see this picture? What does this kind of tell you? One thing that is evident to anyone who's watching this is that there are so many ways to structure the afterlife depending on who you are and what you are, depending on what kind of individual temperament you possess. There are so many ways, and obviously none of them can be individually true because the exact same thing has to happen to everyone. But we'll not go there in this video. So there is another form of seeker, people like me. If you believe, and all this is vaguely belief because you can never surely know it. If you believe that the human mind is capable of figuring out existence completely by itself and on its own, if you can pit one idea against another in your own head without prejudice and eliminate one and keep the other, you are in a way restructuring your mind. You know things like what is worth thinking, what is not worth thinking. These are the people who are called Jnana yogis. And the reason that image appears there is because I have a book on this. So you can get that book, you can know what this method is completely about also. And these are both kind of derivatives of yogis. Yoga is about training the body and mind. Karma yogi is mostly people functioning with body. Jnana yogi is people functioning with mind. Now we have gone through so many of these. Is there yet another way of being a seeker? There is this person called Alan Watts, uh, who's credited with this phrase, "You are the universe experiencing itself." Now, this is what Wikipedia has to say about him. Alan Watts was an English writer, speaker, and self styled philosophical entertainer known for interpreting and popularizing Buddhist, Taoist, and Hindu philosophy for a Western audience. Watts gained a following while working as a volunteer program at some radio station at Berkeley. So, when you take it all into consideration, when you see that people are living in various ways. People are dying all the time. People are still getting born all the time. You come up with stuff like this. You are the universe experiencing itself. Experiencing itself, sorry. And you make memes like this also. Can you see this meme? There is a guy. He is on a cardboard box. He is covered in some kind of noodle spaghetti thing. There is one, two, three, four, five hands around him. Somebody is holding up two things as horns and a tail, I guess. So, this is what happens when you think these things, that you are the universe experiencing itself. There is no difference between you and someone else. There is no difference between you and noodles. There is no difference between you and cardboard box. This is what happens when you think these things. But he's influenced by Hindu philosophy and Buddhist and Taoist philosophy. So, what is he talking about? He was talking about these people. And you shouldn't really talk about them because the way that the human mind is, the way that your mind is, the way that everyone watching this video, their mind is that your curiosity and imagination can get you into dangerous places. But now there are people. There was one funny guy. His name was I think Reza Aslan or something. He he was some kind of journalist in some prominent organizations. Also, he went and he saw them and he interpreted something very funny. And it's also being spoken on mainstream Indian channels like the Ranveer Show. Uh, and So I might as well tell you what it is from a scientific perspective, from a logical perspective. If you intentionally deny your humanity, not as an idea or a lifestyle, I mean, sure, one day you and I will all be dead and will cease to be a human being in this way. But if you do it now, if you voluntarily give up the discretion of your mind, say you stop discriminating between food and excrement, or the difference between living and dead, you will, in a way, have changed the fundamental understanding of being a human being. Not necessarily as more evolved, not necessarily animalistic, but maybe both. And you start traversing an entire range of possibilities: wildlife, creatures, entities, deeds, things like that. And then you become this type of person. This is called Agora, and I've put that in red because this is a completely different way from most of us, from most of our imaginations also. But yeah, in India there is a large spiritual gathering called the Kumbh Mela, and if you see the kind of people that turn up over there, you're likely to find these guys. So in this way, there are multiple different ways to handle the afterlife. Now, let us talk about the other thing that we were going to talk about, which is freedom. And again, while talking about freedom, let's try to talk from the context of being a believer, where most of us already are, or most of us at least think we are. The goal of a believer, this type of person, uh, is to try to be 100% believer. So that entire thing is blue. 100% believer means you have achieved a kind of purity in your life. Now, but if you are a Hindu, you have a certain kind of freedom. You can choose to be something like this. It is 15% or so believer. You can also choose to be something like this. It's 25% believer. You can also choose to be a little bit, now 15% believer obviously means 85% something else. Here you obviously understand 75% is something else. You can also be 25% believer, 25% something else, 25% something else. We have just gone through so many different ways of being. Any of those combinations is possible if you're a Hindu, because you have that kind of freedom to restructure yourself. And you can, of course, be 100% believer also. One of the reasons Hinduism never gets, almost can never also get called a cult, is because of this kind of freedom. You are never given any kind of rules. You can always be as free as you wish. You can always pull in whatever aspects of the philosophy or of the world, of the ways of life that you find appealing elsewhere, and you can restructure yourself to be a different thing than necessarily believer. And in this way, all kinds of mixing can take place. And it has taken place for hundreds of years. It's this stuff that we were talking about here. This is not just 5 to 10 different ways of being, it's 5 to 10 different routes of being. Because this believer here, this itself can be about You know, there can be a thousand different objects of belief. There can be a thousand different types of God. So there are a thousand different categories here, and then there are all subcategories everywhere, and all of them are allowed to mix as much as they choose to. And because of the unique quantities in which everything can be mixed, it represents millions of possibilities. This is why India is known as the land of millions of gods, because each person has the freedom to define their existence. Now, I want to ask you also this logical question. We have understood all the types of seekers. We have understood also all the huge varieties of people that can exist. How do you categorize a large, somewhat complex mass that is unrelated to you? And the answer is you create a term for it. Human beings are experts at creating terms. So, for example, if you're in India and you are a vegetarian, you create a term called non vegetarian food. Non vegetarian food means that you have taken all the possible things that people eat other than vegetarian food and you have put it in one category. So, poultry, seafood, egg, fish, meat, it's all put together into one category called non vegetarian food. This is a category of food that is only understood by vegetarian people. Vegetarian people will say, will not go there, they serve non vegetarian food. In the same way, people who are accustomed to eating some form of meat in every meal, they find it very odd when you serve them a meal that is completely vegetarian. They have created a category called vegetarian food. They don't care if it is potato, tomato, beans, what it is, but that category of food exists for them as vegetarian food. It is a large group of things which are unrelated to them. For the vegetarian, there is non-vegetarian food. For the non-vegetarian food, there is vegetarian food. Both are categories that they have nothing to do with. Can you think of any other way that we create such categories? One term you'll hear in international politics a lot is immigrants. They don't care where those people came from, which are those individual countries. They just say immigrants. These people came from outside and they have come to our country. It's a group of people who have come from outside. It's a large collection of people who are not native to the place. It's called immigrants. So, in this way, human beings are very good at creating terms. Now, can you think it is possible to take all of these different types of people, the believers and atheists, scholars, Ayurveda practitioners, karma yogis, and all other kinds of seekers, and put them into one category? Actually, it's not possible, isn't it? There are hundreds of deities. There are all these people and their variations, and all the ways these people mix together. It's not a group. This is exactly what the absence of a group is. But still, this happened. The word Hindu is a made up terminology. In my book called Hinduism Revisited, I make the case that it was probably done by the Mughals. It was an invading army which came into India, and then it took all these different types of people and it started calling them Hindus. Are the Mughals likely to have done something like this? We have all been taught that they ruled over large areas of India. We have also been taught that they ruled over long periods of time. It's not difficult to imagine. You imagine one Mughal ruler is there. He is he has a clerk who is working under him. He is doing a population census. He's saying categorize all these people as Hindus. Would those who were being called Hindus, like for example, one Karma Yogi is going there and he says, okay, under his name he's writing Hindu. Do you think the Karma Yogi cares? You think the yogi who is going there and under his name they're writing, oh, you're also a Hindu? You think he cares? Of course not. Our brain works in this such a way. We will not bother with unconnected things. If you want to write me down as Hindu, you can write me down as Hindu. It doesn't change the fundamental nature of what I do and what I practice. So in this way, a Mughal is very likely to categorize all these people as Hindus, and a Hindu is very likely to not bother. Think about this logically. Think about it practically, not in the context of what you have been taught or that what you have heard, but just think about it logically. Why should so many of these people be clubbed together and called as one term, like a term like Hindu, when they can literally be opposites? Two people whose ideas of the afterlife can be complete opposites from each other are being put into one category. Now, why is all this so important? You'll always hear this term on the news called Hindu majority. You'll hear it in the newspapers. People are writing books. What is Hindu identity? So what do you mean by Hindu majority? Obviously, it doesn't mean anything. What is a majority? A majority, and why is a majority a majority? A majority can be called a majority only when it collectively does something or collectively thinks in a certain way that possibly leads to an outcome. That's why we just went through an entire plethora of people, of different types of seekers and different types of believers, so that you understand that it is not a group. And when it is not a group, how is it a majority? Every possible form of understanding of the afterlife is included under Hindu. Is that even sensible in any way? It is like you say the majority of people living on earth are human beings. Does that mean human beings are the majority on earth? Does that mean anything? In context of what are you saying that's a majority? What are they doing together? If we are comparing all the other species and we say, oh, the human beings are causing deforestation, then yes, that's still valid. Majority of human beings are destroying plants, they are destroying environment, they are causing climate change, they are polluting the oceans. That's a majority goal as a human being. What is a majority goal as a Hindu? There is apparently no goal. So, this video should end two delusions in your life. The first is that there is a group of people called Hindus. These guys are not doing anything as a group. They don't even believe in the same things. Then how are they a group? The second delusion, that there is a Hindu majority. Because there is absolute freedom of thought, even a small cult can become a majority in India, but the Hindus can't become a majority. Now, both of these are delusions that both the news and the books are pushing at you all the time. 24/7. And I don't mind you being deluded. But if you're following my content, you need to be fundamentally truth seeking because I am fundamentally truth seeking. And so, if there is any takeaway from today's video, it is that these two delusions should simply end for you. Now, today we spoke about these two sides, classification and freedom, but there are several sides. And on several of these sides, I have books. So, if you would like to know about history, I have a book called this Hinduism Revisited. Also, I have a book on karma, and this is another thing that wasn't included earlier. Maybe as a Hindu, you have an idea of liberation or moksha, or maybe you're part of that philosophy gang. In that case, there is a book of ego and enlightenment also. All of these books you can just get from the original social media site. You have to just go to this group. It's called Download Ebooks by Abhinav Kumar. It's a public group. You don't have to join it. You can just download the books over there, or you can join it to increase the numbers. It always looks good. Thanks for doing that if you do that. But yes, that is one simple, convenient place where all the books are available. Now, just to end this blog post, what is actually going on? What is the point of any of these things? If you get, no matter what your way is, what your way of handling the afterlife is, if you get it to uh, work in some way, if you manage to crack something, there is something like a barrier for all of us, which is between us and the beyond. If you manage to crack it in some kind of way, you enter the space called mysticism, my favorite space. I classify people into mystics and non mystics. There is another book of mine called Mind and Intelligence. If you see that, I openly tell you that all human beings are just monkey see, monkey do. You hear something, you read something, you learn something from somewhere and you repeat it. That's all that people are doing unless you cross this barrier. If you cross this barrier, you come to the space of mysticism. What does mysticism mean? Mysticism means you have a certain awareness of other dimensions. You have an awareness of other yardsticks with which to measure life, not just the standard yardsticks of family and money and things like that, but you have other yardsticks. You have a yardstick like time, you have other yardsticks like sleeping and waking. You evaluate the quality of life in a different way, but we will do more about that some other time. Right now, that's it for me. This is a long blog post which I usually don't do, but yes, this is a nice one, longer one. Until next time, take care.